Hello, everybody. Welcome to Big Data London. It's good to be back. Can you guys hear me all right? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. All right, great. Thank you. So let me start off by introducing myself. My name is JOVITA Tam, and my curiosity has led me onto a very interesting journey to become an engineer, an attorney, a strategy consultant, a yogini, and now a global program leader. I'm very passionate about innovation, growth, and sharing. And I'm amazed at how much technology have changed our lives and is continuing to change our lives. In the coming 25 minutes, let's go on a journey together to explore how, as leaders, mindset matters, because there really isn't a one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to working with data strategy. I believe that advancement comes not just from technological breakthroughs, but from us working really hand in hand with each other. And to venture forward and to manage the uncertainties that we need to deal with, I really think that we have to keep it real. So today I'll be sharing 5 concepts with you that goes into my mindset advantage when working with data and data strategy. And by the end of the talk, I hope that I would have inspired you to think about what mindset you are bringing to your work for data and data strategy. So let's get started. So here, we have one of my all-time most favorite quotes. And it says that we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. And that, I think, is a very powerful quote. So I'm going to let us sit with that for a minute. So taking a look at this, and from my experience working with hundreds of leaders and organizations around their transformation and around their data, I've noticed some common themes. What I've noticed is that rarely is the entire thinking or the mindset that the organization or the leader have is out of date or it isn't working. Usually, it's a smaller part. Maybe the organization have changed, maybe something within the leader have changed, maybe the people have changed within the organization. And so the goal, obviously, is to identify the bits which are no longer serving us for today and won't work for us for tomorrow, and to let them go. So the mindset advantage for data strategy will elevate us from just doing and working on the data to being as well. And why is this important, right? I think the first reason of why this is important is we want to avoid fatigue. We want to avoid exhaustion. It doesn't make sense for us to be making the same decisions over and over again. We want to make the decision once, and in the future, if they're the same questions that comes up, we go back to the answer that we had previously decided upon. Because regardless of whether we have a formal data strategy or not, let's just be real. Decisions around data is being made every single day at every level of the organization, whether we like it or not. It's simply that's the case. So without a strong mindset when we work with data, this is when people tell me, oh yeah, our organization have strategies, we have meetups, we have offsites, we have all these wonderful things. But our strategy more feels like the constellation in the sky. And that's just simply not cool. So the second thing then is we want to be able to innovate and harness opportunities. We want to be able to act as deliberately as we can, taking mindful actions so we can avoid pitfalls. And when we're no longer making the same decisions over and over again, and we're avoiding the major pitfalls, that's when we have the bandwidth, right? To be able to think differently, to be able to think outside of the box and harness those opportunities. And last bit, which is something that I find personally is the most important bit about why we need to have this mindset advantage, is because we want to reduce our reliance on the need to be able to predict the future. Yes, we have data analytics, and we all want to sit here and go, okay, this is where the trends are, this is where it's going. But the reality is it's extremely difficult for us to be able to accurately predict the future. And we want to reduce our dependency with that. We want to be able to grow and move with our business, and we want to be able to lead the change and add value to the business as data leaders. So into our first concept that goes into our mindset advantage. And I know we haven't known each other for very long, but I'm going to ask you to get comfortable with some discomfort. And where am I coming from with this, right? I'm really coming from the place of, well, what is the essence of a strategy? And so to me, the essence of a strategy is about choice. It's about making decisions and choosing to do things differently. It includes two very important parts. The first part is, what is it that we're going to choose to do, right? The second part, equally as important, which we often neglect, is, well, what are we not going to do, right? And of course, these decisions are going to guide us in the face of uncertainties and when we need to make those decisions, right? So then what is a strategy not? A strategy is not a goal or an aspiration. And we hear this all the time. We want our business to grow by 50% this year. That is absolutely wonderful and is an amazing goal to have, right? But is that in itself a strategy? And personally, I think the answer is no. I think it's good to have goals, but it doesn't mean that we stop there. The next thing is, technology is great. We're all here at Big Data London. This is wonderful. But technology in itself is not a data strategy or a strategy in its comprehensiveness, right? So by just us sitting here saying, we sign with this vendor, this is our strategic partner, we're going to go at this raw, this is amazing. It is amazing, but that in itself is not a strategy in its entirety. And the last bit is that a strategy should be distinguished from operational effectiveness. Operational effectiveness is necessary. Whatever a process is, we want to make sure we're more efficient with this over time. This is how we can stay competitive, or one of the many ways we can stay competitive. But by just doing the same things we're doing the previous year or the year before more efficiently, in itself is not necessarily choosing to do things differently. So that's not a strategy. So yeah, like getting slightly uncomfortable, already. So why do this, right? Why do we have to choose? I think the reason why we have to choose is because we're all operating under some kind of constraint, whether we like to believe it or not. It's always a constraint optimization problem, right? It could be that limited budget this year. It could be limited time frame. It could be limited skills or headcount, whatever that is, which is why we need to choose. The next thing why we need to choose is that there isn't a single way to compete. We talked about before, as we get really good at this, what we're going to be able to do is to think differently and to be able to capture those wonderful opportunities. And the last thing is that a strategy would help us prioritize. So it is an extension when we're venturing forward with this. What's the ramification, right? Where's the discomfort? I think we need to understand that strategy, just like our work in data analytics, is intrinsically subjective, right? And that's something very important that we need to keep in mind. And I think the next thing is also with respect to the fact that we need to place bets about the future. And we can't make all of the risk goes away. The future may or may not turn out to be the way we thought it would be in the time frame, like your reporting year, for example. So there's necessarily going to be some discomfort because some risk is going to remain. And lastly, for those of us here as data leaders, as we're making these decisions, we all have skin in the game. It's simply that. So, onto our second concept here. I want all of us to thrive, not just to survive. And we do that through resilience through change. And we hear this a lot, right? Okay, we have to embrace change. You may hear it, at work, and you may even hear it from your yoga instructor. Let's embrace change. Well, what does it really mean? So here, I've brought to you my top 3 of what embracing change means. The first one, I believe, is that we simply need to engage with it, and we need to constantly be in a dialogue with it. Gone are those days where we sit here and work on discrete transformation, where we sit here and we do a transformation project, and it's like, let's say 2 years, 3 years, and at the end of it, we wrap up or we start a new one. It's about always on transformation. We always need to be evolving. The second one is resilience through change. Now, there's a lot of scientific research that's being done on this. We used to think that the idea is that we go from order to disorder back to order. And of course, our recent experience with COVID is telling us that that's not necessarily the case. We're going actually from order to disorder to reorder. And what does this mean for us? This means flexibility is now a skill, right? Very much by the time when we get to the reorder phase, what we think are best practices is a good fit for our organization is different. So we simply have to stay flexible. The last one is keeping it real. As we do this day in, day out, whether it's transformation, data, or data transformation, we know that there are challenges. We know that we're dealing with a lot of things, and so we need to set our expectations accordingly. And I think we need to be prepared for a prolonged period of disorder. And we also need to set our expectations to realize that by the time we get to reorder, perhaps a new cycle have already kicked off. So lastly, I know that we really all in this room care about growth. Growth is great, right? But we've also heard about things called growing pains. So recognizing growth itself is a form of change, I think is also relevant. So now, before we get into our third concept, which is to respond thoughtfully, this is another one of those quotes that really speaks to me. And it says, between stimulus and response, there's space. In the space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies growth and freedom. Now, I want to draw your attention to the later part of this, which says, in our response lies our growth and freedom. That's extremely powerful. So, we've just talked about responding thoughtfully, and you see a framework up here, and you're like, okay, great, we're nearing the end of day one of Big Data London, another framework. So first of all, I can tell you that I couldn't get this framework into a nice acronym, so sorry about that. But what I can share with you is that although this framework very much looks like common sense right now, because we're on dry land, right? We're in Big Data London, we're enjoying the company of like-minded people, and Slack and Teams isn't dinging in a way that you feel like you're working at a casino. I'm sure you guys all know what I'm talking about. Maybe for those that you do, give me a nod, no? Yes? Anyways. And I'm sure if we go survey everybody in this room, right, who's attending today, and we go out and survey, whatever executives, whatever leaders you like, everybody would come and tell you that I would prefer to work on my business, whatever my role, my function, in a proactive way. It's simply what people prefer, right? This is why we're at a data strategy theater. This is why we have strategies, is we want to be proactive. We want to be building this thing that we want to be building, right? We want to be realizing our business vision. However, though, the reality is, as I personally reflect on my work, and I'm sure is true for a lot of you guys out there, is that there's a good part of our work every day that involves dealing with fires. Sometimes it's a tiny one. Sometimes it could feel like a forest fire, right? And so this is where this framework has saved my butt more than a few times. So let me get started. And there are 4 steps to this. The first one is pause and breathe. So, and we can practice this breathing here, together once. So let's all take an inhale together. Breathing in, side out. And I know that could feel very unnatural, right? Because we want to jump right in, we want to stop the bleeding, we want to do all those things. But the reality is, step 1 is we really need to create that space. Because we need to have that space so we can reset the expectation, right? After all, that's where the magic happens, right? So the next thing then is for us to reflect and then engage. And I would have to say that, I encourage you to look at this separately, right? First reflect, then engage. Because in the reflection stage, we're still keeping our healthy distance away from our stimulus here. And I think it's important for us to be able to articulate what's at hand, including the context. Because we all are trained in our own different area of expertise, and we're much more likely to jump to looking at a problem or looking at something with that point of view. But this is where, again, the distance is going to help us. Next, we engage by sizing the situation from multiple perspectives. At the very least, I kindly ask you to size it from the perspective of the business, the people, and also the technology. Only then do we move to strategizing and planning. Because there's a lot of talk out there, and isn't that part of the talk about the data strategy theater, is we want to align the data strategy to the business strategy. So, of course, that needs to be a part of what we're doing. And that comes in at this stage, is we're like, okay, are we still aligned? Because it would be great if we are fighting fires and we get rid of this fire. But if we do this in a way that's not consistent with the business purpose, business objective, or the business strategy, essentially we're moving further and further away. So it doesn't really matter if you have a data strategy in place if every day we're fighting fires in a way that's not consistent with that. After we have alignment with the strategy, we look towards planning our next steps. And only then do we go and take our action. And of course, we can repeat step 1 to 3 as many times as we would like. So the idea here is most definitely pause and then act appropriately. So our fourth concept here is business in the context of data strategy. I'm a firm believer that business problems, innovations, none of these things happen in a vacuum, right? And I'm going to let you have a minute with the picture here. So just like what I said before, right? Although a lot of us would like to be fully proactive and to be taking actions and building and innovating all the time, we do end up finding ourselves fighting fires, right? And this is sometimes how I feel, right? Things are happening at rocket speed. I have a strong motivation, like say fire under my ass. There are a billion hoops to jump through, and I need to get to a business outcome. And there's only one way I believe we can do this. It's through alignment and embedding the data strategy into the business strategy as much as possible. And notice we have a lot of hoops here, right? So what these hoops are is that I'm actually encouraging you to please look at your organization. Look at other parts of your organization because it's very, very informative, right? And last year at this very theater, what I had shared with the group was that I feel like as data leaders, we are in a unique position to help our business become more customer-centric. And that's super powerful. And for those of us who are leading data transformation initiatives, well, let's look at how our organizations are handling other transformations. There's so much that we can learn because just because this is a data transformation, it doesn't mean that our organizations all suddenly is going to react to transformation differently, right? Chances are there are certain things that we can learn which is already happening. And of course, I encourage you to seek out other leaders within your organizations and partner with them. Because quite frequently, when we're trying to make it to the same target of the business outcome and the business value, there's a lot that can be said about finding your ally within your company. And I think this goes both ways. As data leaders, we have to be mindful of the rest of the organization. But data also flows through our organization today and is a major business lever, right? So the flip side, I then believe, is that I do believe that this mindset, working of data and data strategy, is not just for those of us who directly have a hand in it or maybe have a role that's being identified as very strongly data-related or technical or whatever that may be. It's for everybody in the organization. And after all, it is my curiosity following and wanting to solve business problems that have brought me to data. So we are at our last concept that goes into the mindset strategy for today. And this is one that I personally find the most interesting, also the most challenging, but at the same time, it could also be the most rewarding. And as I started, the talk today saying that my belief is that advancement don't just come from technological breakthroughs. It really comes from us working with each other hand in hand. I think it's important for us to look beyond the buzz of the technology and also but really focus on the people. And I think there are two aspects to look at, which is collaboration and leadership. And here's my top 5. The first one is no one is crazy. You're like, okay, it certainly doesn't feel that way because sometimes when I'm in the room, I think they're crazy, or I look at them as if they have 3 eyes like that fish in The Simpsons, or that they're looking at me like I have 3 eyes and I'm like, maybe I just woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Those thoughts do come through our heads, or maybe it's just mine, who knows. But this is a concept that I borrowed from a book called The Psychology of Money, and it says no one is crazy. And there's an entire chapter in that book that's devoted to this. And I think the important part here is to realize that we ourselves go out into the world every day, and we interact with the world and know about this much of the way the world actually works from our everyday experience. But that, together with our values, actually forms very much of our worldview, right? Think about that for a second. When we are sitting in a room with a lot of different, users, different stakeholders, we're each coming with our own view, and none of us is crazy. So when working with each other and when collaborating with each other, I think it's important to remember that there's always a subjective element, and we always bring something to the table. The second thing is we are all human. And you might be sitting here going, duh, right? We're all human, right? But for here, I want to bring your attention to the idea that we're simultaneously logical as well as emotional. Of course, working in a business as data leaders, we have to sit here and we have to deliver business value, and we have to justify the value that we bring to our organization. It makes perfect sense for us to be logical. But we are also simultaneously emotional, right? And that's ourselves, our stakeholders, our clients, everybody who we are working with. And it's actually really funny because as I was preparing this outline for this talk, what happens is that I shared this with somebody. And immediately after they heard the outline, they asked me, so wouldn't it be really cool if we can put a metric to this? And I was like, yes, it would be really cool if we can put a metric to this. But at the same time, at least from my experience, taking a look at, kind of the business environment, I do feel like that often if we do put a metric to it, which is hugely useful, we all become fixated on that metric. We're like, okay, where's this going? Where's this coming from? How do I make this better? And then slowly, we overemphasize on the metric and we forget about the story and our emotional component. So I think it's important when we're looking at this to remember that there is a balance. And the last point that I want to bring to the fact that we are all human is the idea that, yes, we're sitting here talking about strategies, competing differently, making different decisions, and all those wonderful things. But as humans, we do have more in common than perhaps we're giving ourselves credit for, particularly, I find, in the business setting. So the next part is design for real users. And this is something that I'm drawing from my background working in customer experience. It's that I feel like sometimes we're a little bit tempted to sit here and go, well, this is how we would like the users to work with the data. But the reality is we need to look at how users and stakeholders are actually interacting with these real systems. And only if we meet them where they are today do we have a chance in having resonance and being able to have growth and move forward with these users. Take a very basic example, right? I'm an attorney, so sometimes I get into a headspace and I would sit here and I'll draft something, right? Whether it's an email, a deck, or whatever it is, and I'm like, oh, I feel so good about this. I've written it all down. It should be laid out like this. And then I remember, the person who's going to be reading this is likely going to be holding onto their smartphone, at the back of an Uber, kind of swiping like this, going like, okay, where am I going to get it to the end of this? What am I going to do with it? Like, what the hell's going on, right? So I could sit here and I can be thinking about how to draft my email in a certain way. Or I can sit here and go, well, how are my users actually going to be interacting with this? And how can I meet them where they are? And the last bit is with respect to leadership. We are in the data strategy theater, but I'm a firm believer that culture eats strategy for lunch. And it's not just lunch, sometimes it's breakfast, dinner, and 2 snacks, and maybe an ice cream as well. So as much as it's important for us to have a strong mindset and be working on data strategy, I also think that it's important for an organization to have their message, right? To have C-level representation around data, not just from a visibility perspective, but from a substantive perspective. And the last point around people, which is something that I've talked about before, is that data flows through the entire organization, right? We're all in some way working with data, being a consumer, being a producer. So in a sense, we all need to take ownership with this data leadership mindset when we're working with this. So here we have the 5 concepts that goes into the mindset advantage, I call it, working in data and data strategy. And it's important to think about this and go, well, as times change, maybe you would change, your team would change, your organization would change, that each of the weighting of these pillars would be different. And of course, I encourage you to do this with a smile on your face while, taking deep breaths as necessary. So I hope that this talk has inspired you to think about your very own mindset advantage and what you're going to bring to your journey when you're working with data and data strategy. So thank you very much for coming today. Here's my LinkedIn QR code. I'll be posting resources around this for the next while, I guess. I would love to learn how you're getting on with your journey. And please drop me a message and catch me after this talk. I would love to learn more about how you work with your data and data strategy. Thank you very much.